Welcome to April, and it's time for us to introduce a new grain for our Grains Explorer Challenge for 2024. And this month, we're going to be looking at the world's tiniest grain, teff. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains Grid. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So as I mentioned, this is another video for our Grains Explorer Challenge for 2024, where we are exploring all kinds of different grains for 2024. We pick one each month, and we experiment with it and we figure it out. And these are grains that are not very well known to us. So be sure to follow along. And if this is your first video that you have seen with the Grains Explorer Challenge and you want to catch up, be sure to check out the playlist up here so you can catch up with the other grains that we've explored so far. Now, of course, for the full adventure, that is actually reserved for the Grainy Bunch. So if you're one of my grainies, you will actually be you get extra recipes, videos, and more. So to know more about the Grains Explorer Challenge and also to sign up for the Grainy Bunch for the full adventure, be sure to go to grainsandgrit.com/grainsexplorer. Okay, so let's talk about this month's grain, which is teff, possibly one that you've never heard of. And I will go ahead and apologize in advance. I feel a little bit under the weather today, so got some things going on. Now, as always, here's what we will be covering in this video. We will first be giving y'all a general overview and history of the grain, nutritional benefits, what teff is used for, and we wrap it up with how you can use teff in your own kitchen at home. Before we begin, be sure to comment below if you've actually used teff, if you've ever heard of it. What do you plan on making with it? Let me know your thoughts, especially, did you even know about teff? And then what did you learn in this video? Just tell me all the things that's on your brain in the comments below. So first off, general overview and history of teff. So what in the world is teff? It is actually a grain that is predominantly grown in Ethiopia. It is an ancient grain that they have been growing. Archaeologists and historians date it back to about 4,000 years BC, which, comes right after the flood. Totally fits. It comes in a variety of colors from red to brown. I actually have the brown variety sitting back there. And it's actually the world's smallest grain. I mean, these things are tiny. I mean, you can't even tell that these are grains. Each one, see right here, the light is in it, but super, super, super tiny grains. They say that 140 grains of teff can actually fit in your fingernail, which is so crazy. Imagine 140 wheat berries. That's probably about a cup or more. And as I stated, it is an ancient grain and it is naturally gluten-free, which is why it's becoming a bit more popular in the West thanks to all the gluten-free diets. Now, as I stated, it is predominantly grown in African countries, especially Ethiopia. I mean, this is just a pure Ethiopian grain. It is a staple. This is their staple grain for that country. However, thanks to advanced farming methods, they are finding that teff can be grown elsewhere. And in fact, here in the United States, Idaho is actually producing some great quality teff. It is a hardy plant. If you feel like growing it, it can be grown in all sorts of conditions. However, it wasn't until recently that farmers just haven't really been able to grow it, except in Ethiopia. As far as where the word teff came from, it is believed that it comes from the Amharic word tepha, which actually means lost, which I think is very appropriate because this grain seed is so tiny. I can only imagine how many have gotten lost. Another fun fact is it was actually very sacred in ancient Egypt. And in fact, it was so sacred that it was usually one of the last foods placed in an Egyptian pharaoh's tomb as their last meal. So pretty cool history there. Again, an ancient of ancient grains that ultimately wasn't really even known to those of us in the West until fairly recently. Now, next up, the nutritional benefits of teff. So like many whole grains, it is actually a great source of copper, manganese, magnesium, selenium, phosphorus, and zinc. But again, that's in many whole grains. Now, where it does shine, it is actually higher in fiber usually than typical wheat and barley. So it's a very high fiber grain, and it's actually very high in lysine, which if you've watched me, I watched these videos before, wheat as the king of all grains is actually a bit deficient in lysine. So I usually say just eat some beans with it, or you can actually consume teff to be able to get that great lysine content. That actually leads to the other benefit where teff is actually a very high protein grain. In fact, Ethiopia is actually famous for their long distance runners, and they credit that to teff because Ethiopians get about 2/3 of their protein from this teeny little grain. It's actually a power punch in calcium. In fact, it actually is the highest amount of calcium as far as the grains go. The best amount of calcium is going to be found in teff. And it's also high in vitamin C, another one that is actually a bit deficient with wheat. And of course, already stated, it is a gluten-free grain as well. All right, so what in the world is this tiny little grain used for? And the most famous dish that teff is used for is the Ethiopian fermented bread called injera. It's actually a flat bread, super easy to make as far as like a sourdough type bread that as far as that goes. So basically, I mean, all that you're doing is just grinding up some teff, adding in some water, let it sit there for 4 or 5 days to ferment, and then it is a flatbread, so you don't have to worry about like all the rising and all the things like that. So again, this is the main staple for their bread in Ethiopia, and how they use injera bread is a lot like a plate. Many times they'll make these huge flatbreads of injera, and they'll just serve their food on it, and you're eating the bread as you're consuming the meal. I actually plan on myself making not only injera bread, and I do hope to share that with y'all sometime this month, for my grainies in the grainy bunch. I'll be showing y'all the full version where I'm actually wanting to make Dora Wat, which is a very famous Ethiopian dish with the injera bread, and I'm super excited to try to make it because I've actually never had Ethiopian food before, and now I get to do it here at home. So be sure to stay tuned, my grainies. Now, because of the popularity of gluten-free grains and all of that in the West, teff has also been used for cupcakes and cakes and porridge, and I mean, just many things that you would use a gluten-free flour or combination of gluten-free grains. Teff is actually thrown in there with some of them as well. Just know that obviously with it being a brown grain, the brown one at least, that you're going to get some color to it that you're not going to get from other grains. Just remember that it is gluten-free, so it's going to lack that typical chewy type texture that you find with grains that contain gluten. So actually let me know if you've actually tried injera bread. I love to hear about it. Do know that typically in the United States, if you've been to a restaurant to kind of appease Western palates, many times if it looks fluffier, they're adding in wheat flour or barley flour. So do know that if you're going out and getting injera bread, ask if it's actually 100% teff flour used or if they're adding in those other grains. And last but not least, how to use teff in your kitchen. So fun fact about teff is you actually never find a white flour type version of teff. And that's because the grains are so tiny, they do not separate the bran and the germ out of teff. So even if you buy the teff flour, that is a whole grain flour. Now, of course, you know, on this channel, I do recommend milling it yourself at home because that way you get the full maximum benefits, because when you mill grains, oxidation starts to occur and certain vitamins are going to start leaving the scene in just a few days. So if you're able to grind it at home, definitely grind it at home. But do know if you maybe don't have a grain mill right now, you can actually buy the teff flour, knowing that it is whole grain. So as I already mentioned, how to use it at home, the most popular dish is injera bread. Looks super easy to make. As of recording this, I have not made it yet. So for me, I'm like, oh, it looks so easy. I'm hoping I haven't stuck my foot in my mouth, that it is still pretty easy. But that is the most common thing to use teff flour. But you can actually make teff porridge. You can use it in so many things. I've actually seen it in like gluten-free breads being used there. Usually they're adding in, of course, other things to make it more of a bread type product. They also use it in other dishes for Ethiopian cooking, like Ethiopian stews. So there's actually many different things to use. And that's what this Grains Explorer Challenge is all about, is to get out of our comfort zone and try new things that we may not have tried on our own. So there you go. Short intro about Teff. Pretty simple grain. Again, this one is I'm most excited about. I've literally had this on my shelves for a long time now, but I've just yet to use it. Do know Teff is a bit harder to find. I did buy mine from Azure Standard, the whole grain, so I can mill it myself. I'm not sure where else to find it, so I'll link it to Azure Standard down below. But if I can find it anywhere else, like on Amazon, I think Country Living Foods actually has it, so I'll link them down below, and any coupon codes that I have as well. So let me know what you plan on trying to use with Teff. Do you plan on actually using it this month? Are you wanting to avoid it like the plague? Let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, to catch up on the challenge, to sign up for the Grainy Bunch, view more details, see what other grains we're going to be exploring this year. All of those details can be found at grainsandgrit.com/grainsexplorer. And as always, I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.